Hi, second graders. Happy Wednesday. I was so excited to get to do a little video chat with a few more students today, so that was really nice. I met with a few boys from our class today. I have a meeting tomorrow with a group of girls, and then Friday, hopefully, as many of you are able to, can join our class morning meeting, so that will be lots of fun. I'm really enjoying getting to actually talk to you guys and kind of see you in not real life, but sort of real life, other than just pre-recorded videos. So that's been really nice. The chapter that I'm reading today is called "Mixing the Dream." Yesterday was a very, very important chapter. It was when Sophie had come up with this idea for the BFG to mix together, create this dream to give to the Queen of England. And in the dream, the Queen of England would have is that she would be dreaming about what is actually happening with these giants. She would dream that these 9 giants are going off every night and eating human beings. And then at the end of her dream, she would dream that Sophie is sitting on her windowsill. So the hope is that the queen will wake up and think, oh my goodness, that was a horrible, horrible nightmare. I'm so glad that's over. And then she'll look at her windowsill and see Sophie sitting there and think to herself, oh, that can't be a dream. That must really be happening in real life. And then Sophie will direct her to where the BFG is, and then he'll show whoever needs to know how to get to Giant Country and hopefully put an end to all of this. So hopefully the BFG can make this dream. He said he's able to just mix different types of dreams together to create a specific type of dream. It was dark now. The night had already begun. The BFG, with Sophie sitting on his hand, hurried into the cave and put on those brilliant, blinding lights that seemed to come from nowhere. He placed Sophie on the table. Stay there, please, he said, and no chittering. I is needing to listen only to silence when I is mixing up such a naughty, plexicated dream as this. He hurried away from her. He got out an enormous, empty glass jar that was the size of a washing machine. He clutched it to his chest and hurried toward the shelves on which stood the thousands and thousands of smaller jars containing the captured dreams. Dreams about giants, he muttered to himself as he searched the labels. The giants as guzzling human beings? No, not that one. Nor that one. Oh, here's one, and here's another. He grabbed the jars and unscrewed the tops. He tipped the dreams into the enormous jar he was clutching, and as each one went in, Sophie caught a glimpse of a small sea green blob tumbling from one jar into another. The BFG hurried towards another shelf. Now, he muttered, I is wanting dreams about giggle houses for girls and about boggle boxes for boys. He was becoming very tense now. Sophie could almost see the excitement bubbling inside him as he scurried back and forth among his beloved jars. There must have been about 50,000 dreams altogether up there on the shelves, but he seemed to know almost exactly where every one of them was. So here is the BFG, and he's just gathering all of these different dreams that he needs to mix together. Okay, dreams about a little girl, he muttered, and dreams about me, about the BFG. Come on, hurry up, get on with it. Now, where in the wonky world is I keeping those? So he's just kind of talking to himself as he's gathering these dreams. And so it went on. In about half an hour, the BFG had found all the dreams he wanted and had tipped them into one huge jar. He put the jar on the table. Sophie sat watching him but said nothing. Inside the big jar, lying on the bottom of it, she could clearly see about 50 of these oval, sea green jelly-ish shapes, all pulsing gently in and out, some lying on top of each other, but each one still a quite separate individual dream. Now he is mixing them, the BFG announced. He went to the cupboard where he kept his bottles of Frobscottle, and from it he took a giant egg beater. It was one of those that has a handle which you turn, and down below there are lots of overlapping blades that go whizzing around. He inserted the bottom end of this contraption into the big jar where the dreams were lying. Watch, he said, and he started turning the handles very fast. So here's a picture. It's kind of like an old-fashioned egg beater sort of thing. And it has handles that he kind of does this with, and then it mixes underneath. And now we have, electric mixers and that sort of thing that we can use. Okay, flashes of green and blue exploded inside the jar. The dreams were being whisked into a sea green froth. Those poor things, Sophie cried. They is not feeling it, the BFG said, as he turned the handle. Dreams is not like human beings or animals. They has no brains. They is made of zazamus. After about a minute, the BFG stopped whisking. The whole bottle was now full to the brim with large bubbles. They were almost exactly like the bubbles we ourselves blow with soapy water, except that these had even brighter and more beautiful colors swimming on their surface. Keep watching, the BFG said. Quite slowly, the topmost bubble rose up through the neck of the jar and floated away. The second one followed, then a third and a fourth. Soon the cave was filled with hundreds of beautifully colored bubbles, all drifting gently through the air. It was truly a wonderful sight. As Sophie watched them, they all started floating toward the cave entrance, which was still open. They're going out, Sophie whispered. Of course, the BFG said. Where to? Those is all little tiny dream bits that I isn't using, the BFG said. They is going back to the misty country to join up with proper dreams. This is all a bit beyond me, Sophie said. So the pieces of the dreams that he doesn't need are just kind of like floating away so that he has the exact dream that he needs in his jar. Dreams is full of mystery and magic, the BFG said. Do not try to understand them. Look at the big bottle and you will now see the dream you is wanting for the queen. Sophie turned and stared into the great jar. On the bottom of it, something was thrashing around wildly, bouncing up and down and flinging itself against the walls of the jar. Good heavens, she cried. Is that it? That's it, the BFG said proudly. But it's horrible, Sophie cried. It's jumping about. It wants to get out. That's because it is what do you think? What would we call this type of dream? It's not a fizz wizard. It's a trogglehumper. That's because it's a trogglehumper, the BFG said. It's a nightmare. Oh, but I don't want you to give the queen a nightmare, Sophie cried. If she is dreaming about giants guzzling up little boys and girls, then what is you expecting it to be except a nightmare, the BFG said. Oh, no, Sophie cried. So Sophie feels badly having to give the Queen of England someone who she really, likes and I think respects to give her such a horrible dream. But I think the BFG is thinking, if we're to stop this and we want the Queen to know, then she has to experience this nightmare. Oh, yes, the BFG said. A dream where you was seeing little chidlers being eaten is about the most frightsome, troggle-humping dream you can get. It's a kicksy boggle thumper. It's a wopsy grob switcher. It is all of them riddled into one. It is as bad as that dream I blew into the flesh lump eater this afternoon. It is worse. Sophie stared down at the fearful nightmare dream that was still thrashing away in the huge glass jar. It was much larger than the others. It was about the size and shape of, shall we say, a turkey's egg. It was jellyish. It had tinges of bright scarlet deep inside it. So here's a picture of it. And scarlet is a shade of red, like a deep, dark red. So I know it doesn't look too bad to us in the jar, but as Sophie is seeing it, it is really bad. There was something terrible about the way it was throwing itself against the sides of the jar. I don't want to give the queen a nightmare, Sophie said. I is thinking, the BFG said, that your queen will be happy to have a nightmare if having a nightmare is going to save a lot of human beings from being gobbled up by filthsome giants. Is I right or is I left? I suppose you're right, Sophie said. It's got to be done. She will soon be getting over it, the BFG said. Have you put... Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. My kids are being a little noisy upstairs. Have you put all the other important things into it, Sophie asked. When I is blowing that dream into the queen's bedroom, the BFG said, she will be dreaming every single little thing-a-ling-ling you is asking me to make her dream. About me sitting on the windowsill? That part is very strong. And about a big friendly giant? I is putting in a nice long gobbet about him, the BFG said. As he spoke, he picked up one of his smaller jars and very quickly tipped the struggling, thrashing Trogglehumper out of the large jar into the small one. Then he screwed the lid tightly onto the small jar. That's it, he announced. We is now ready. He fetched his suitcase and put the small jar into it. Why bother to take a great big suitcase when you've only got one jar, Sophie said. You could put the jar in your pocket. The BFG looked down at her and smiled. By goggles, he said, taking the jar out of his suitcase. Your head is not quite so full of grime sludge after all. I can see you was not born last week. Thank you, kind sir, Sophie said, making a little curtsy from her tabletop. Is you ready to leave? The BFG asked. I'm ready, Sophie cried. Her heart was beginning to thump at the thought of what they were about to do. It really was a wild and crazy thing. Perhaps they would both be thrown into prison. The BFG was putting on his great black cloak. So they just made this dream and they're heading off now. He tucked the jar into a pocket in his cloak. He picked up his long, trumpet-like dream blower. Then he turned and looked at Sophie, who was still on the tabletop. The dream bottle is in my pocket, he said. Is you going to sit in there with it during the travel? Never, cried Sophie. I refuse to sit next to that beastly thing. Then where was you going to sit? The BFG asked her. Sophie looked him over for a few moments. Then she said, so listen to where Sophie is going to sit or ride. If you would be so kind enough to swivel one of your lovely ears so that it is lying flat like a dish, that would make a very cozy place for me to sit. By gumbo, that is a squackling good idea, the BFG said. Slowly, he swiveled his huge right ear until it was like a great shell facing the heavens. He lifted Sophie up and placed her into it. The ear itself, which was about the size of a large tea tray, was full of the same channels and crinkles as a human ear. It was extremely comfortable. So his huge ear, he was able to turn it this way and kind of put his head down, so Sophie climbed in. And she said, although his ear is much bigger, of course, than a human's ear, it is the same type of ear, just much bigger. I hope I don't fall into your ear hole, Sophie said, edging away from the large hole just beside her. Be very careful not to do that, the BFG said. You would be giving me a cronking earache. The nice thing about being there was that she could whisper directly into his ear. You is tickling me a bit, the BFG said. Please do not jiggle about. I'll try not to, Sophie said. Are we ready? Yowie, yelled the BFG. Don't do that. I didn't do anything, Sophie said. You is talking too loud. You is forgetting that I is hearing every little thing-a-ling-ling 50 times louder than usual, and you is shouting away right inside my ear. Remember how his hearing is so good that he can hear, I think he said a ladybird's, I think he said a ladybird, but we would know a ladybug's footsteps on a leaf. So his hearing is so good that he can hear that. He could hear Sophie's heart beating from across the street. And now Sophie's in his ear and she's talking quietly, but him, it sounds like, it's really, really loud. Oh gosh, Sophie murmured. I forgot that. Your voice is sounding like thunder and trumpets. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sophie whispered. Is that better? No, cried the BFG. It sounds as though you were shooting off a blunderbuss. Then how can I talk to you? Sophie whispered. Don't, cried the poor BFG. Please don't. Each word is like you was dropping buzz bombs into my ear hole. Sophie tried speaking right under her breath. Is this better? She said. She spoke so softly she couldn't even hear her own voice. That's better, the BFG said. Now I is hearing you very nicely. What is it you was trying to say to me just now? I was saying, are we ready? We is off, cried the BFG, heading for the cave entrance. We is off to meet Her Magister, the Queen. And usually you would say Her Majesty, but he, of course, doesn't always speak correctly, so he's saying Her Magister. Outside the cave, he rolled the large round stone back into place and set off at a tremendous gallop. And that is the end of the chapter. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's hope that when we get this next chapter that everything seems to go smoothly. And I'm really, really hoping that this dream works, or this Trogglehumper nightmare works. It is a pretty good idea, though, pretty clever of Sophie to think of. All right, so we'll hear more about that tomorrow. Bye for now.